Hello there, I'm Mary Jo Land, a registered psychotherapist coming to you from Priceville, Ontario, Canada. Welcome to this series of videos, When We Are Very Young. This is created to assist parents and those professionals who work with parents. Many of the videos pertain to parenting children who have joined the family through adoption, foster care, or customary care. Some of the videos are about typical child development, while others are more specific to children who have experienced loss, trauma, and neglect during their early development. Attachment, trauma, and parenting are the main themes in this series. Today's presentation is The Bunny Story. One aspect of developmental trauma that is necessary for parents to understand is the mammalian response to substantial threat. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. Like all mammals, humans have a built-in mechanism that, when threatened with harm or death, operates without the need for conscious control. This mechanism directs our physiological responses, and by that I mean the internal body responses, and the behavioral responses, which are the external or visible to other responses. This mechanism involves the senses, the brain, and the body. The senses perceive the threat, and the brain and the body respond. The senses perceive the threat, the midbrain reacts to it, and directs the body via the autonomic nervous system to react behaviorally. I say all this not because you need to know the anatomy and the physiology, although I do find it helpful to know it. I say it to illustrate that the behavioral responses are hardwired. They are not under conscious control, and they are not choices or decisions. And it's important to note that with repeated use, these responses become more likely to be used. So when threatened, our brain and our body respond. And this is especially true for children. We have little cognitive control over the body's responses. Think of jumping out of the way of a falling object. You react by jumping out of the way, then you feel fear and all of the body's reactions, such as the pounding heart and the adrenaline-filled limbs, and then you start processing cognitively. That is, you start talking about it. That was close. So I'd like to illustrate how this system works with the bunny story. And if you know me very well, you've probably heard the bunny story before. It's an allegory about understanding the autonomic nervous system's response to and its role in survival behavior. So here goes. A cute little bunny is hopping about in the clover field on a beautiful early dawn, munching the sweet clover it favors. Just then, the shadow of a hawk passes over the bunny. Freeze! The bunny's first response is to instantly freeze. It becomes motionless on the outside, but not on the inside. On the inside, the bunny's heart is pounding, its blood pressure is high, it's highly energized and ready for whatever might come next. And this freeze behavior is controlled by the bunny's midbrain, and it is a survival strategy and it is to imminent threat. Not only that, the hawk's visual system responds to movement, so this freeze behavior reduces the chances that the hawk will see the bunny. So freezing, remaining motionless, is the bunny's primary or first defense reaction. But alas, it's too late. The hawk has seen the bunny, and the hawk begins to dive. Flight! The bunny now runs for its life, zigging and zagging, trying to avoid the hawk. Its bladder and bowels empty, reducing the load that it needs to carry. Yeah, the autonomic nervous system is also connected to the gut. And the bunny's arousal level is at its peak, as is its fear, which we assume based on the behavioral markers of the autonomic nervous system. But it's too late. The hawk's talons are grabbing the bunny, and now the bunny turns to fight, and it's scratching, clawing, biting, screaming, and yes, bunnies scream. And the bunny tries to fight off the hawk. But the hawk is bigger and stronger, and the hawk flies up into the air with the bunny in its talons. Now a strange thing happens. The bunny's body responds to imminent death by shutting down. In shutdown, the autonomic nervous system rapidly switches from high arousal to low arousal, low heart rate, low blood pressure, and low respiration. This reaction has two purposes for the bunny and all mammals. The first is that the shutdown of the body reduces blood loss at the site of injuries. Very helpful. Secondly, this state is also called feigned death because the bunny now looks dead, and hawks don't eat dead stuff. Dead animals don't move and don't bleed very much. So hopefully, if you're rooting for the bunny, as the bunny lies there unconscious on the tree branch, the hawk will decide to go for some more lively prey. Remember possums. They are slow and they have few physical defenses, and so feigned death is their primary defense mechanism. We call it playing dead. This strategy works quite well given the number of possums around. So how does this bunny story relate to children who have experienced early trauma and neglect within the caregiving environment? So again, let's define our terms. Trauma refers to harm, threats of harm, or threat to survival. For an infant, these include exposure to prenatal toxins, including tobacco, drugs, alcohol, and maternal stress hormones. Prenatal starvation is also a threat to survival. Postnatally, harms include abuse, neglect, and frightening experiences in all its forms. Separation and loss of a primary caregiver is certainly a threat to the infant's survival. Early trauma refers to trauma that occurs during the critical developmental period in the child's life. That means during gestation and the first 3 years of the child's life. It is in this time that the brain and the nervous system are forming in terms of structure, function, and connections between structures. Recent research has demonstrated that early trauma can affect brain development in all 3 of these areas: form, structure, and connections. Repeated or chronic trauma during the developmental period may result in changes to the brain, and those changes may result in long-term changes in functioning of the child. Interestingly, not all children who have demonstrable brain changes have changes in functioning. Interesting indeed. So, some children are resilient even though they may have trauma brains, so to speak. The main idea for the bunny story is that children who have experienced early trauma and neglect may be more reactive to threat. Their responses are brain-based and controlled via the autonomic nervous system. Their fear reactions are not choices and cannot be controlled and modified by behavior modification strategies. So, what are these fear reactions that we see in the children that we raise? What do they look like? How do they display? We see behavior. However, we must understand the meaning of that behavior. In other words, parents need to respond to the cause of the behavior, not the behavioral display. The behaviors that are associated with higher levels of arousal can be thought of as falling into the categories of fight, flight, and freeze, while shutdown has a low arousal level. Fight can be seen in children as resistance, non-compliance, physical and verbal aggression, whereas flight might be demonstrated in children who bolt from a situation, going to hide or trying to escape. And freeze is likely to appear just before some action takes place. Remember the bunny. So when your child is in freeze, watch out. Some action is likely to follow. Shutdown may occur rapidly or gradually. The first sign is often yawning or burping or stretching. The next signs might be daydreaming or vagueness, zoning out, and signs of deeper shutdown are stupor, non-responsiveness, fainting, and unconsciousness. Sometimes even seizures. As you might suspect, how a parent responds to a child who is in shutdown would be quite different from a child who is in a high arousal state. There is more to discuss, though before we do that, the window of tolerance is an important concept which we will discuss in the next episode. Thanks for joining me. It's not much of a tale, but I'm sort of attached to it. I'm Mary Jo Land. Until next time.